Resilience is the ability to persist over time.
In the Manila Bay and other bays that experience red tides, it is the marginalized that is affected in health and in economy.
The engineering is the ability to absorb, thrive, and then recover. The faster you're able to recover, the more resilient.
Sa Pilipino, ito ay katibayan at katatagan sa mahirap na sitwasyon at ang kakayahang bumangon muli.
Yung ecological naman, the ability to adapt. Yung evolutionary resilience, vale, to really innovate and be creative.
Resilience is really being able to spring back from adversity, but it should have learning. And therefore, it strengthens you to be more resilient than before the adversity came to you.
Before COVID-19, the Philippines was already on to SMT-based measures to improve its resilience capacity. With COVID, the country was awakened to the need for resilience of our economic, health, and educational status as well.
The country as a whole is, I think, not so resilient because while we have the capabilities, the opportunities, and the resources to cope with COVID-19, the whole body is suffering because the leadership and management is not working so well. When it comes to individual resilience, those who have more resources, capabilities, and opportunities will be more resilient than those who are not.
A lot of the problems really may be interconnected, vale. You have to look at it from a holistic point of view. It encompasses more than natural sciences or physical problem, vale, but also it gets into the ecological, biological, as well as social pa nga.
Among issues and problems we have are poverty, ecosystem destruction, climate change, and variability.
Much of our attention is placed only after the disasters happen. What we should do really is to take early action years before the hazard strikes. And we should put our attention and our resources into that type of planning.
We need SMT-based transdisciplinary and inclusive approach to coping with possible hazards.
The fragmentation of society needs to be resolved for resilience.
Communication is very, very important. And we should communicate to the people using not just scientific communication means, but through arts, music, understand the mindset of the Filipino people so we can communicate better.
Well, the way to move forward is interoperability.
So we have to do a lot of work as a person, as a community, and as an institution to really have resilience as one of the values of the Filipinos. Yung tunay na resilience na towards improvement.
Building resilience requires sustainability science inspired by transdisciplinary approach.
To be sustainable, you have to be resilient. To be resilient, you have to be sustainable.
Go natural, go with nature's flow. Non-structural or natural interventions, as well as good planning, is the most sustainable.
Finally, we need to harness and strengthen the Filipino spirit of bayanihan.
Magandang hapon, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Maya pagat panahon para sa ating mga kapatid sa Luzon, na yung bagamalab, masantos siya nga marhay na hapon. Para sa ating mga kapatid sa Visayas, maayong hapon, maupay nga kulop, maayong ugto. At para sa ating mga kapatid sa Mindanao, assalamualaikum, malingkat mahapon, mapiya katuwa alongan, buenas tardes. At para po sa ating mga panauhing banyaga, good afternoon, annyeonghaseyo, konnichiwa, salamat siyang, shanguhao. Welcome po sa ating mga regular na tagapakinig at tagapanood dito sa Zoom at sa ating Facebook Live. Hello po sa inyong lahat. And first, we would like to apologize for the delay, but we would also want to thank everyone for sticking around with us. At welcome po sa ating ika-52nd episode ng the Filipino Sustainable Development Goals or SDG Action Hour. Ito po ating lingguhang kumustahan at kwentuhan para sa maganda, maayos, mabuti at makabuluhang kinabukasan. At gaya nga po na nasabi namin noong unang webinar natin para sa buwan ng Oktubre, ang October ay declared as the National Indigenous Peoples Month. And what better way to end this month with a webinar guest na isang proud katutubo, working with Indigenous peoples for the Indigenous peoples. For this afternoon, our topic is entitled The Importance of Indigenous Peoples' Participation in Environmental Conservation Advocacies. Ang ating pong panauhin ngayong hapon na isang magiting na katutubong Ifugao. He finished his Bachelor's of Arts in Mass Communication, major in Journalism sa University of the Philippines, Diliman, at nagsilbi rin po siya bilang isang public servant. And our guests have served this community for a great amount of time already. He has been a municipal councilor for Kiangan, Ifugao in 1992, municipal mayor for Kiangan from 1995 to 2000, Ifugao governor from 2001 to 2004, and 2007 to 2010. And lastly, he served as the lone district representative of Ifugao for 3 terms from 2010 to 2019. At sa kanyang pamamalagi po sa House of Representatives, our guest has been a champion of the causes na relevant at mahalaga para sa ating mga kapatid na katutubo. Nagsilbi siya ang tagapamuno ng Committee on National Cultural Communities from 2010 to 2013 and Vice Chairperson para sa Committee on Indigenous Peoples from 2013 to 2016. At ilan sa mga lehislatura na naisulat ng ating panauhin ay ang Philippine Indigenous and Community Conserved Area Bill, legislation to preserve the Ifugao rice terraces, at isang bill para sa national land use na mapabilang sa mga ancestral lands as one of the 3 main domains in the country, to name a few. At ang kanyang pagmamahal at pagiging isa sa kalikasan ay natural bilang isang katutubo. And from his own words, up in the mountains, detached from technology and civilization, one can't help but be awed by nature. Then you realize that we are destroying nature and has to stop. For this afternoon, you will be given another informative talk by none other than Sir Teodoro Teddy Baguilat. And I think hindi pa po naka-join Sir Teddy. For a while lang po. Again, we apologize for the delay, but we'll just fix some problems po. And again po, I guess our guest is already in the Zoom chat. Yes po. So again, everyone, let us all welcome our guest for this afternoon, a proud katutubo, Sir Teddy Baguilat.
Hi, hello. Gandang umaga sa lahat. Gandang hapon sa lahat. Sorry, I'm very, very harassed today. This is my fifth meeting and I'm in a very public place ngayon. Nasa mall ako. So kung sakasakali may lumusturbo, kaya papalayasin ko dito. Pasensya na lang. But sige, I'll be talking about the ICC, Indigenous Community Conserved Areas. This is, one can say that it is a philosophy of conservation. It's also a method of conservation. And at the same time, maaari mong ituring siyang lugar, territory. Ang kanyang buong pangalan ay Indigenous Community Conserved Areas and Territories. Sa atin bilang isang katutubo, maaari itong mabansagang sagradong lugar ng mga katutubo, sacred lands of indigenous peoples. Pero in other countries, ang ICCA could also mean non-indigenous local communities. For instance, kasi sa Europa, wala silang itinuturing ng mga katutubo doon except for Northern Europe, sa Scandinavia. But sa France, sa Germany, wala silang itinuturing ng mga katutubo. Pero they have what we call commons or collectives, na ito ay isang area na pinangangalagaan ng isang komunidad. Okay. So that's why sa buong mundo, it's indigenous peoples and local communities conserved areas and territories. Pero sa Pilipinas, pag sinabi mong ICC, it refers to mga ninunong lupa o mga sagradong lugar ng mga katutubong pamayanan. In fact, si Giovanni Reyes, isa siyang gangkanai, ang description niya sa ICCA ay it is the heart of the ancestral domains of indigenous peoples. Okay? Meron akong PowerPoint, pwede bang share. So sige, territories of life. Kasi yung ICCA, it's an English term, di ba? Indigenous Community Conserved Areas. Pero sa mga ibang lugar, sa mga ibang regions, iba-ibang mga wika, iba yung tawag nila doon sa kanilang sagradong lugar. So eventually, we agreed on the term territories of life. Although sa aming organization, ang tawag ay ICCA, Indigenous Community Conserved Areas. Pero sa mga Latin Americans, tawag nila dyan, ICAs. I think that's territorios something. And then sa French naman, because in Africa, may mga French-speaking countries, no? Yung mga kasama namin doon, ang tawag nila sa territories of life. Okay. Sige, next slide. Essentially, ang ibig sabihin ng territories, gagawa ako ng aking sariling layman's description, no? These are areas that are being managed or conserved by indigenous peoples and local communities using their traditional governance systems. So sa mga katutubo, meron silang tinatawag na customary. Sa mga local communities naman, meron silang mga community governance. Bagamat hindi sila gobyerno, pero yung isang village, yung isang county, yung isang township, no? Meron silang mga sariling mga rules and regulations that govern their natural resources. So again, these are areas that are managed by indigenous peoples and local communities using their own traditional governance that they have effectively conserved or preserved for centuries. So, sabihin, matagal na din sila sa area na yun. At saka ang ginagamit nila yung kanilang traditional management systems na very effective. At ang kanyang patutunguhan o ang kanyang objective doon sa kanilang pamumuno sa kanilang lugar is conservation. That's one. Sustainable development, so that includes livelihoods, no? And the general well-being of the tribe. Okay? Kasi ang konsepto kasi ng conservation pagdating sa mga indigenous peoples, minsan naiiba doon sa konsepto natin ng conservation pagdating naman sa gobyerno. Okay, next slide. Yeah, diyan kami, the consortium. Again, consortium is such a corporate word, so we're still trying to find a more suitable name. Pero we're all over the world. We have 255 members in 80 countries. Indigenous peoples, local communities, mga NGOs, plus 400 honorary members, no? Mga scientists, activists, environmental advocates, mga researchers, mga indigenous peoples leaders, mga community leaders, and one politician. That's me. And I am the president of the consortium. Nagsimula siya noong 2010, was established in 2010, and I was elected as the president in 2018. Itong consortium na to may council. Yung council ay composed of members from different regions. No? And then meron kami mga regional assemblies. So ito sa Asia Pacific, one of the more active regions. We have 5 sub-regions. Southeast Asia, South Asia, East Asia, West and Central Asia, and then the Pacific. And then sa Latin America, they have 3 sub-regions. Sa Africa naman 5. No? And then we have the North American and Circumpolar, which includes Europe and part of Arctic. So yan yung parang organization structure of the consortium. We have been very active doon sa Convention of Biodiversity. Okay, so pupunta na ako doon sa CBD, Convention of Biodiversity, Conference of Parties. No? Kasi dyan pinag-uusapan yung targets of biodiversity ng buong mundo. At dyan kami nakikilahok, dyan kami nag-advocate, dyan kami nakikibak, dyan kami nakikipaglaban sa recognition ng mga ICCAs. Okay? Next slide. Sige, so yan lang yung description ng ICCA consortium. No? We have 4 thematic areas, no? Yung sustaining territories of life, documenting territories of life, defending territories of life, and then meron kaming gender and youth and intergenerational thematic committees. Okay? Next slide. Yeah. Territories of life are the core and the purpose of the ICCA consortium and its members. So yung aming 280 plus members, no, ang kanyang pinaka-focus is to advocate for the recognition of territories of life at the international, national, and even at the local level. Okay, next slide. Okay. So ano ang definition ng territory of life? Paano mo masasabi na isang lugar ay sagrado o maituturing na territory of life? Una, may komunidad, may tao. So, kasi kunyari, pag protected area, sa Pilipinas kasi ang ating legal mechanism in terms of recognizing protected areas is the NIPAS, no? National Integrated Protected Area Systems. No? Ganon na in other countries. No? There are state-declared protected areas. Meron din mga protected areas that are managed by international organizations, no? Through international statutes. No? Sa ICCA, sa mga protected areas pala, ang mindset is leave it untouched. Dapat walang community bond. So, na nagkakaroon ng conflict. For instance, in Africa, galing lang namin doon, sa Kenya, ang issue nila is doon sa Masai protected area, Masai Mara, pinalayas yung mga Masainis. Kasi ang concept kasi ng conservation is a Western colonial concept. Agree? Pero ganon, no? And ang nangyayari is, dineclare siya na protected area para sa kapakanan ng mga colonial rulers, para sila mag-safari, mag-games, no? Binabaran nila yung mga wildlife. Pero dapat walang tao doon. So pinalayas nila yung mga tribes. Okay? Sa ICCA naman, sinasabi namin is yung conserved area, yung territory of life, may tao doon, may community. And that community has a strong band doon sa lupa. Kaya nga ninunong lupa. No? Most ancestral domains are territories of life. O kaya yung territory of life nasa loob ng ancestral domain. O kaya yung ancestral domain sinasakupan ng kanilang territory of life. Kasi may bond yung community doon sa lupa. No? Second, this is important, merong governance systems. Okay? So, sa National Integrated Protected Area System, ang governance system is DNR. Meron silang rules. no? Internal rules and regulations when it comes to NIPAS, when it comes to declaring critical habitats. No? Sa ICCE naman, merong sariling community governance or traditional governance. No? Yung community, yung custodian community, doon sa territory nila. Okay? And they are able to enforce these rules effectively. So doon sa kanilang sagradong lugar, meron silang mga kinakailangang sundin at maayos nilang nai-implement itong mga patakaran nito. So for instance, sa amin sa Ifugao, no? Yung rice terraces sa Banawe, collect yung kanyang surrounding watersheds doon sa rice terraces sa Banawe, manage siya collectively by farmers. Okay? Sa amin sa Kiangan, yung tribo ko sa Kiangan, ang management ng watershed ay family-based. So ako meron akong sariling traditional forest or traditional village. Sa Banawi naman, collective. No? Pero hindi yung buong tribo. It's a collective of farmers. Pwede silang mamutol ng kahoy doon sa kanilang collective watershed. Pero bago sila mamutol ng kahoy, kinakailangan magpaalam mo sila, kunin nila yung pahintulot ng mga kapwa nilang mga rice terraces farmers and owners. So it's been managed for centuries. So importante sa ICCA, meron kang management system, effective at saka na-enforce yung mga rules at ang kanyang patutunguhan. That's one. Pero kasama rin ang sustainable development, so yung kabuhayan, and then the general well-being of the community. Okay. So yun yung pagkakaiba. Kasi sa protected area, ang pinaka-pangunahing mandate niya is basta conservation. Okay? Doon naman sa ICCA, kasama ang conservation, pero kasama rin yung sustainable development of the area at saka yung general well-being ng community. Okay? So that's the characteristics of a territory of life. Next. Ayan. So, territories of life, diverse siya, iba-iba. No? Merong bundok, merong waters, merong mga sapa. For instance, no, yung Coron Island, which is a very popular tourist destination in the Philippines, that's the ninunong lupa of the Tagbanwa people in Palawan. Okay? That's also their ICCA or territory of life. No? Sagrado sa kanila yung Coron Lake. Diba? Ganda yan sa postcard pictures. No? That's very emblematic of the Philippines. Very iconic. No? But that's the sacred lands, sacred waters, ICCAs, and part of the ancestral domain of the Tagbanwa tribe. In fact, ito ang mga lakes doon sa Coron. Pero ang binuksan nila for tourism na dalawa lang. Meron pa silang mga sagradong lakes doon na bawal puntahan ng publiko. Okay, next. Yeah. So ito, iba-ibang mga pangalan. Okay, sa amin kasi like for instance, ang aming ICCA, ang tawag namin doon sa aming communal forest o yung mga ancestral forest namin ay muyong. So may muyong system. No? Sa ibang lugar naman ito, iba-iba. Oran, Ili, Asang, Rumak. No, Oran is in India. No? Yung Adat naman is in Indonesia. No? Maaari rin na itong mga, the last part of this slide, locally managed marine areas and fishing grounds could also be considered as ICCAs or territories of life. So for instance, sa Dinagat Island, that's in Mindanao, no? May municipalities doon na nag-declare ng kanilang sariling protected marine areas na ang nagmamanage ay yung buong municipality. So may kasamang LGU declaration, hindi naman sila makakatutubog, pero the entire municipality takes care of that marine protected area. So hindi siya DNR protected area, hindi siya under NIPAS, pero it's locally declared and managed marine protected areas. That could also be ICCAs. Kasi sabi nga ng mga taga-Dinagat, doon nanggagaling yung kanilang pinaprotektan, doon nanggagaling ang kanilang kabuhayan, marami silang mga alamat rin, mga kwento kung bakit napakahalaga yung protected area doon sa kanilang buhay bilang mga dinyanag-katungnods. Okay, next slide. So, yan. So, ang kahalagaan ng territories of life is one, it is for conservation of nature. Nakwento ko na, it is for sustainable livelihood. So, dyan din nanggagaling yung kabuhayan. Dyan nanggagaling ang pagkain ng komunidad. Dyan nanggagaling ang patubig ng komunidad. For instance, no, Sierra Madre. Sa Sierra Madre, ang sacred lands ng mga dumagats ay yung Mount Irid. Okay? Ang tingin nga nila sa Irid ay para siyang Panginoon, para siyang heaven o langit. No? Kasi sacred yun sa kanila kasi doon nanggagaling lahat o doon ang pinagmulan lahat ng river systems ng Rizal, Bulacan, and Quezon dyan sa Mount Irid. At because of that, doon rin nanggagaling sa Mount Irid ang tubig ng mga taga Metro Manila. Kasi ang tubig na ang domestic water supply of the 12 million Metro Manila residents come from the Sierra Madres, come from the sacred lands of the Dumagats. And it originates sa Mount Irid. So, yun. Hindi lang siya source of kabuhayan, source of pagkain, diyan rin nanggagaling ang buhay. At importante, no, yung collective decision making nga. Sinasabi dito, realization of the collective rights and responsibilities of the community. Kasi nga, ang mga katutubong pamayanan, saka yung mga local communities na nagmamanage ng mga ICCs, ang kanilang demokrasya is collective. So, hindi ka nag-iisip ng pang sarili mo lang. It's for the entire tribe or the community or the village. And then, ang decision-making process is consensus building. Consensus. Hindi katulad sa mga non-indigenous peoples, ang ating demokrasya o ang inyong demokrasya is, sige, mag-debate, mag-diskurso, pakinggan lahat ng panig, and then after, kung wala pang pagkasunduan, botohan. Diba? Yes or no. Diba? Sa mga indigenous peoples, kinakailangan consensus. Habang merong isang tao na tumututol, isa o dalawa, then hindi nagkakaroon ng consensus. Kaya nga yung kaliwadan, kung napakinggan nyo na yan, narinig nyo na yun, yung kaliwadan na gusto itayo dito sa Rizal at saka sa Quezon, no, sabi ng National Commission for Indigenous Peoples, nagbigay na daw ng pahintulot yung mga katutubo. Sabi ng mga katutubo, hindi totoo yan. Hindi yan ayon sa aming traditional o customary laws. Kasi, marami pa rin ang tumututol sa kaliwanan. So bakit sinabi ng NCIP na pumirma na daw yung mga leaders? Samantalang, yun nga, sa consensus building, for as long as there is someone who objects to the decision, then dapat pakinggan. And in fact, dun sa kaliwanan, dun sa area, more than half, tingin ko, mas marami ang tumututol dun sa dam na yun kaysa sa mga sumasagot. Okay? Next. So ito lang yung gustong sabihin in relation to the Convention of Biodiversity. Sabi kasi sa Montreal, nagkaroon ng Conference of Parties last December. Ang new biological targets o biodiversity targets ng mundo is 30 by 30. Ibig sabihin, 30% ng mundo daw dapat should be under some sort of protection. Okay? Kasi ang sabi nila, I guess this is something that's scientific, no? Pag meron kang 30% na protected yung biodiversity yon, biodiversity ng mundo, ng lupa ng mundo, then it's ecological balance, it strengthens ecological balance, it makes the planet more resilient to be able to fight climate change, no? To be able to fight pandemics, no? And it is able to preserve more or less life in the planet. So 30% yung target. Okay. Sa ngayon, based on the laws, in either international statutes or yung mga national laws natin, only 14% of the planet's land area, including marine, yung oceans natin, kasi na dun sa Convention of Biodiversity, sa Montreal Convention, no, isinama na yung marine. Importante na kinakailangan maprotektuhan mo rin yung mga oceans. No? Pero 14% lang. Sa ngayon, ang merong legal protection. Ang sinasabi namin sa mga ICCAs, kung kikilalanin ng gobyerno, ng United Nations, ng states, na meron ka rin mga existing na ICCAs or territories of life, That's about 17% of the total land area in this planet. Land and marine ecosystems, terrestrial and marine ecosystems in the planet. So kasama na dyan yung mga katutubo, kasama na dyan yung mga local communities. Aming estimate, 17%. So yung 14% na currently, kasama na dyan yung mga protected areas ng DNR, plus the 17% ng mga katutubo at mga local communities, then you're able to meet the 30 by 30 target of our new biodiversity framework. In fact, lagi nga namin sinasabi, pasensya na lang, wala naman siguro, kung may DNR man dyan, tanggapin lang, pero minsan sinasabi namin na mas effective pa nga minsan ang mga katutubong pamayanan sa mga local communities in terms of preserving the biodiversity than the government itself. That's a fact. Kasi bakit ngayon paliit ng paliit yung ating forest cover? In the 1900s, 70% ng Pilipinas forest cover. Ngayon na lang, it's about 20%, even less. Pero kung aaralin mo yung mga mapa, kung nasaan yung mga critical watersheds, mapping ito, it's proven by maps. Kung nasaan yung critical watersheds, yung key biodiversities, key biodiversity areas, mostly they are located, or many of them are located within ancestral domains of indigenous peoples. Sa Pilipinas yan. So parang sinasabi natin, let's work towards the recognition of the mandate of indigenous peoples and local communities in conserving their areas and territories para talagang ma-meet natin yung global biodiversity goals natin after the CBD, the Conding-Montreal Accord. Okay, next slide. Let's go na lang to the next slide kasi parehas din po sinasabi ko. Ayan. Ang problem is there are threats and challenges. Okay. No, kasi sinasabi natin, okay, kung 17% pala ay ICCAs, then dapat walang problema. Hindi eh. Dahil wala kasi siyang formal recognition. Ito, yung mga threats and challenges. Land and water grabbing. Kaya nga yung mga dumagat remontados, yung mga agda dito sa Quezon at sa Rizal, sila ay tumututol sa kaliwanan kasi mapapalaya sila sa kanilang lugar, sa kanilang sagradong lugar. Sierra Madre para sa kanila ay sagrado. Inappropriate development interventions and sustainable use of renewable and non-renewable resources. Yun ang problema eh. Kasi, like for instance, ang ating konsepto ng development is palagi medyo extractive or something that's commercial. Minsan nga nakasarap sa NCAP, sorry na lang kung may NCAP do, pero yun nga, ang ipinipilit kasi nilang development sa mga ninunong lupa is extractive. Payagan yung mining, payagan yung mga malalaking development projects. Sinasabi ko naman na hindi naman ako tutol sa development. Pero yun nga, baka merong mga development models na mas appropriate doon sa mga territories of life. Instead yung the usual, very commercial, very extractive. Tulad ng mining, forestry, no? Ito, undermining indigenous and traditional institutions. This is a big challenge kasi ang batas, IPRA, ang batas sa Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, ang batas ng Pilipinas that governs ancestral lands and the rights of indigenous peoples, nakasulat siya sa English. It is written in a language that is foreign to indigenous peoples. No? At ang sinasabi ng IPRA, kinakailangan galangin natin yung traditional governance structures ng mga katutubo. Ang challenge doon is the governance structures, yung nabanggit ko kanina ng governance ng mga katutubo, oral siya at traditional siya. Tapos bigla isasalin mo sa something that is bureaucratic, something that is foreign, something that is procedural. So doon nagkakaroon ng conflict na. For instance, sinasabi ng NCIP, dapat in 60 days, magbigay na ng free prior informed consent yung mga indigenous peoples. Eh what if yung kanilang governance systems kulang yung 2 buwan? Baka sa kanila, depende kung ano ang nakikita nila sa mga spirits, no? So yon, no? So nagkakaroon ng disconnect minsan between the traditional governance systems of IPs at saka yung bureaucratic procedures. Okay? Next slide. So yan, nabanggit ko na yung lack of appropriate recognition, lack of appropriate political, legal, and economic support. That's why ako, when I was congressman, ang isang itinatulak ko is yung pagpasa ng ICCA bill, Indigenous Community Concern Areas. Globally, yan ang isang pinaka-target ng ICCA consortium is to get not just recognition internationally. So mukha naman nagkakaroon na kami ng success in the international level because sa Convention of Biodiversity, nababanggit na yung mga ICCAs. Although it is categorized under the what you call OECM, other effective conservation mechanisms. So like for instance, Masungit J Reserve, which is a managed by private foundation, is among the OECMs. Although sa kanya is foundations of private sector. Yung mga ICCAs naman is also considered other effective community conservation mechanisms. Pero at least nababanggit na yung ICCA sa at least sa United Nations Convention of Biodiversity. Gusto namin rin sana sa mga bansa ay magkaroon din ng mga batas na kinikilala itong traditional governance ng indigenous peoples and local communities. And finally, siguro ang isang teka na is external and internal conflicts. Na talaga dahil na rin sa mga batas natin at sa mga extractive industries o yung mga big government projects o energy projects na pumapasok sa loob ng ancestral domain, no, nagkakaroon tuloy ng hidwaan yung mga katutubo. Kasi ang nangyayari is merong sumasang-ayon sa mining, meron naman tumututol. Dahil pinipilit na magkaroon ng desisyon, kahit wala pa yung consensus, pinipilit ng pamahalaan, so nagkakaroon tuloy ng internal strife. At marami na rin sa mga katutubo na pinagalaman yung kanilang karapatan, nararentan sila. Because they're starting to push back, na-realize nila na meron pa na silang meron silang rights under the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. Nalalaman na nila na yung ICCs nila or territories of life dapat kinakailangan ipaglaban nila. So nagpo-push back na karamihan sa mga katutubo and unfortunately, nare-rentan sila. Marami rin sa mga indigenous communities ay nasa gitna ng laban, ng state, ng government, at saka ng mga rebel forces. So nandun sila sa gitna. For indigenous peoples, ang kanilang territories of life or ICCs or ancestral domains, it is considered as peace zones. Kung hanggat maaari, dapat kapayapaan ang namumuno doon. So ayaw nila sana may pumapasok ng mga military, ayaw rin nila sana may pumapasok ng mga rebelde na may dalang armas. Okay? So it affects their ancestral domains. Okay? Next slide. So yan lang, ito yung ginagawa namin sa ICCA, self-strengthening. So importante, kahit wala pa yung batas ng ICCA, ang lagi namin sinasabi sa aming mga members, importante is palakasin ninyo yung inyong unity in trying to protect your ancestral domains and your territories of life. Yun ang nabanggit ko kanina umaga sa UP, no? Na ang problema ng mga AITAS sa FORAC, hindi kinikilala yung kanilang inundo, paano daw gagawin nila? Sabi ko, importante is i-maintain ninyo yung unity nyo. Kahit hindi pa kinikilala ng pamahalan kasi native title yon, wala pang CADT, ancestral domain title, pero kayo mismo, kinikilala ninyo na yun ang inyong sagradong lugar. So yan tinatawag natin self-strengthening. Next is networking. So nagkakaroon kami ng network sa buong mundo at the national, subnational, and international levels. So yan yung aming mga gawain sa ICCA Consortium. Sige, let's pa-fast track na lang ito. Next slide. So ito yung aming mga projects documenting territories. Importante kasi for communities, for indigenous peoples and local communities, yung pag-document ng kanilang ancestral domains, yung sukat nila. Yun kasi ang challenge eh. Karamihan kasi sa mga kultura ng mga katutubo is oral in nature, oral transmission. So pag hinihingi ng NCIP sa yung inyong mga dokumento, nagpapatunay na meron kayong sariling pamumuno, since orally transmitted siya, walang document. So it's important right now na part of the adjustment is also for indigenous peoples and local communities to learn how to document their territories of life. So, diyan malaking role ng mga NGOs kasi diyan sila tumutulong. Next. And then we also need to sustain territories of life. So diyan pumapasok ang mga livelihood systems. Kasi noon kasi hindi namin kinakailangan ng pera. Ngayon, kinakailangan na talaga ng pera. It is the cash economy that radically changed the lives of indigenous people. Noon kasi barter system. So kung kinakailangan mong pagkain, pumunta sa kapitbahay mo, bigyan mo siya ng manok, bibigyan ka ng bigas. If you need to go visit your relatives, okay lang, kahit isang araw maglakad. That's part of life. Life was simple. But now we're part of a bigger society na kung saan para ikaw ay makapag-aral, para ikaw ay mamuhay, kinakailangan mo ng pera. So it's important, ito na yung pinag-alaban namin, no? Na in order to also strengthen the integrity of ancestral domains, kinakailangan bigyan natin ng pansin yung economic sustainability ng territory of life. Kasama na rin yung appreciation ng mga younger generations doon sa kanilang kultura. Because one of the big threats of in ancestral domains, territories of life, ay yung paglisan ng mga kabataan. Kasi marami na sa mga katutubong mga kabataan ay lumalayas sa kanilang hinutupan. Once they leave their ancestral domains, unti-unting mamamatay yung kanilang traditional livelihoods. Unti-unting mamamatay yung kanilang kultura. Eventually, it leads to vanishing tribes. Okay? And lastly, next slide, defending territories of life. So, talagang meron kami mga programs, no? Supporting, no? Yung mga territories of life at saka yung mga defenders nila who are at risk. Okay, so marami kami mga programs dyan, no? Including providing legal help, including providing for funds or making a global advocacy, no? Laban doon sa mga threats sa mga territories of life. So these are more or less our programs. You can sum it up with documenting territories of life. Pangalawa is sustaining territories of life. And finally, defending territories of life. Okay? So that's about it. That is about the International Consortium for Indigenous Community Conserved Areas or Territories of Life. But I'm open to questions kung tungkol naman sa sitwasyon ng mga ICCAs dito sa Pilipinas, maliban doon sa nabanggit ko na tungkol sa buong. Okay? Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much po, Sir Teddy, for that very informative discussion. Actually, may unang tanong na po tayo from our Q&A. So, let me just ask the first question. Is there a specific measurement of land area and number of IP to be considered a place as an ICA?
Wala naman. Tulad ng sabi ko, ICCAs are as diverse as the tribes themselves. Kasi like for instance in the Philippines, there are 110 ethno-linguistic tribes. No? Iba-ibang wika, iba-ibang itsura, iba-ibang pananamit, ganyan, iba-ibang mga ritual, iba-ibang mga spirituality, no? So ganun din, yung mga ICCAs, maaaring bundok, maaaring maliit na, maliit na grasslands, or tulad ng nabanggit ko, yung mga tagbanwa, yung kanilang lake, kaming mga Ifugao, yung aming rice terraces, those are our ICCAs. So, all over the world, iba-iba. In fact, even sa yung mga pastoralists, ito yung mga nagpapastor ng mga baka, they also have ICCAs. Kasi sila yung mga migrants, no? Palipat-lipat ng lugar, but they preserve and protect yung mga pasture lands nila. So, ang tawag sa kanila, pastoralists. So marami, no? Sa Europe, mas collectives and commons, no? Meron silang mga farms sa Europe. Mayayaman yung mga magasaka doon, hindi katulad sa Pilipinas. But very critical sa kanila is, kunyari may bundok doon, because doon nanggagaling yung kanilang tubig. So, yung village manages the watershed for that area. So that's their ICC. So it's as varied as the tribes and the communities themselves.
Do we have questions po from our panelists and other questions from our audience? Yes po, Sir Cesar, you're recognized po.
Yeah. Representative Baguilat, thank you very much for an informative presentation. Ayusin ko yung Okay. Two related questions. What if there is a difference, let's say, between the IPs and the government? One level of policy, sabihin ng IPs, don't touch this, even if it's for water conservation, whatnot. No? So it's a difference of level of policy. The other is assuming there's an agreement on policy, but on operations. Let's say, iba ang approach for water conservation and reforestation of the IPs and iba ang approach ng DNR. So how do you see the resolution of these conflicts, both on policy and operations?
Well, yeah, it's very common actually. There's a lot of conflict between communities and government. In terms of the mindset, kinento ko ng kanina, di ba? Kasi when you talk about conservation, for government, dati ngayon medyo nag-adjust na ang Department of Environment. When you say protected area, there are no communities within the protected area because it's really purely for protection. Ang pananaw naman ng mga indigenous communities na when you talk about conservation, andun sila. They're part of biodiversity. So yun, may malaking pagkakaiba na yun because for the DNR, maybe, or for other people, nature is there, something to marvel at. For indigenous communities, nature is us. We're part of nature. Nature is part of our life. Ganun sila mag-isip. That's why, doon sa kanilang ecosystems, hindi lang siya halaman, not just flora and fauna, not just wildlife. It includes people. That's a big difference in terms of now, kanina, this morning, I was talking dun sa isang talk ko. Ang dami talagang mga batas that conflict with one another. So we have the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, which is very revolutionary in the entire world. It's a model for other indigenous peoples because the IPRA recognizes that there are ancestral lands and that there are indigenous peoples. One, yun. Second, IPRA also recognizes yung tinatawag natin na right to self-determination. So, ibig sabihin kung ito ay ancestral domain, then may karapatan yung mga katutubo magpasya tungkol sa natural resources utilization doon sa kanilang lupa. So, meron kang NAIPAS, nagsasabi na ang mamumuno ay PAMB, Protected Area Management Board. Meron ka namang IPRA na nagsasabi na pag indigenous peoples, ancestral domain, then ang nasusunod is the traditional management systems. So nagkakaroon tuloy ng conflict dyan because there are many ancestral domains that overlap with protected areas. Siyempre, ang bias ko is yung mga katutubong pamayan. Kasi lagi ko naman sinasabi na the indigenous peoples have been in this area for centuries and they have been managed to preserve and protect their biodiversity using their own traditional management systems. So sa akin, sana baka yun yung mas bigyan ng pansin. Kung meron namang isang area na malakas ang governance systems at may community doon at talagang nakaugat or very close ties nila doon sa lupa. It's part of their culture, it's part of their spirituality. So sa akin, sana yun yung mas bigyan ng pansin. Compared to, let's say, state-run protected areas. Because ang sinaside ko lang is ang forest cover nga ng Pilipinas from 70% to down 20%. Despite the so many laws natin, PD 705, diba? Forestry Code, Protected Area System. So sa akin, kinakailangan sanang mas bigyan ng pansin yung governance systems of indigenous communities and local communities. No? Especially those that are historically, pag-aaralan, mas effective siya compared to state-run protected areas. Ngayon, yung tatanong kasi is, what if it conflicts? Diyan nagkakailangan ng discussions. Kasi, this is something that we indigenous people have to accept. Nagbago na yung mundo. We are now under the Philippines. Kung kami lang, we're left for our devices, we have our own management systems. Because now we're part of the government, we're part of the Philippines, we have to adjust. So, ganun rin sa mga indigenous communities. They have to consider that there are also other laws that affect your ancestral domains. Sa akin lang, dialogue. Usap. Because I think naman may mga areas, like for instance, ang Mount Kalatungan sa Bukidnon, it's both an ancestral domain, it's also a protected area. More or less yung mga higa-owners doon, sa tayong DNR doon, nag-agree na both of them will protect Mount Kalatungan. Okay, ang sinasabi pa nga ng DNR, what works, if what works is the customary laws of the higa-owners, then we will follow them. May respect ang DNR doon sa traditional management systems ng mga higa-owners, at least doon sa Bukidnon. So that's an example of laws that may conflict, pero at least because nag-uusap yung stakeholders, then maganda yung pagpapatupad ng protection nila.
Just to follow up that point, Congressman, siguro maganda rin if your group can continually document success stories like what you mentioned. So if success stories can be developed and collated, so both management by the indigenous people and cooperation between the indigenous people and government. So I think the more success stories that are documented, then the mindset can slowly be harmonized. So maraming salamat.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, thank you. Talagang that's the challenge now. That's why yung sa aming consortium, meron kaming farm scheme, meron kaming website, meron kaming dinedevelop ng mga videos, because we have to show the success, the strength of territory supplies management systems na para naman mas tanggapin ng government na this could be a more effective way of conserving biodiversity in the land.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much po, Sir Cesar. Do we have questions po from our panelists? Kung wala pa po, I'll ask one question for Sir Teddy. Nabanggit niyo po kanina si DNR. Well, although alam natin na medyo mainit po talagang usapin when it comes to DNR and NCIP pagdating sa welfare ng mga IPs. With the two flagship program po ng DNR, especially the NGP, how does this affect yung mga ancestral lands natin? And even NIPAS, NIPAS po pala, NIPAS and NGP, the National Greening Program, how does this affect yung conservation po ng mga ancestral lands and domains po natin?
Yeah, actually, meron namang mga indigenous communities that participated in the National Greening Program. Pero, yun nga, ang parang sinasabi nila is, bago pumasok ang Protected Area System or NIPAS doon sa kanilang ancestral domain, dapat kinakailangan ng pahintulot nila the right to self-determination. So before they engage in the NGP program of the DNR, it has to undergo the free prior from consent. That's fine with me. Walang problema yun. Ang importante lang, because what we're trying to emphasize is yung traditional natural resource management systems ng indigenous peoples. Sana yung NGP promotes endemic and native species. Kasi yun ang nagiging problema, pinapromote nila exotic, mahogany, gemelina, ganyan. Hindi na yun yung it has been proven to be counterproductive when it comes to biodiversity and watershed conservation. Ang mas effective in terms of watershed protection, resilience of the biodiversity is native and endemic species, which is the traditional management systems, natural resources management systems na mga katutubo. So sa akin lang, para walang gulo, sige, NGP, tulong ng gobyerno yan sa mga katutubong pamayanan, pero galangin natin yung natural resource management systems ng mga IPs.
Thank you po, Sir Teddy. We have one question po sa ating Q&A box. How does the Commission of Human Rights coordinate with LGU and IP in relation to SDGs as well? If you can answer po.
Not that I am aware of. Hindi ko alam kung meron. In fact, I don't know if pagdating sa sustainable development goals, what is the agency in the Philippines that focuses on it? Alam ko, supposedly NEDA, National Economic Development Authority, but because rights-based rin naman yung mga SDGs, I guess the Commission on Human Rights has a SDG, popular right, popularizing SDG projects. But that's the problem kasi talaga marami sa mga kababayan natin, they don't know about the SDGs. They don't even know about climate change. Yung COP, pag-uusapan ngayon sa Dubai this December. It's a very big thing. No? The COP in Dubai is very crucial because it talks about the life of the planet. Marami sa mga Pilipino hindi nila alam yan. Even the Convention of Biodiversity. Even the 30 by 30 new biodiversity effort. So yun ang challenge. How do you now popularize these issues? So yeah, the question kasi sa mga SDGs said, even among congressmen, marami sa kanila hindi nila gamay kung ano ba itong mga SDGs na ito.
Thank you po. Yes po, Sir Cesar.
Yeah, I have two more suggestions or questions for Congressman. One, Congressman, we've had a speaker here, Dr. Sid Sia. Dr. Sid Sia is very much linked with IPs on the health side. So I think it would be a good thing if you can also link up with Dr. Sid Sia because he is on the indigenous health and documenting the indigenous health practices. The other suggestion I'd like to strongly propose is that you develop the economics and market research, whatever, for the indigenous people and the indigenous communities. Because if the indigenous communities are not having growth economic prospects, then slowly aalis sila. So I think, well, aside from the indigenous health of Dr. Sia, if the IPs can also develop a strong market research for their products. So those are just 2 points. Thank you.
Yeah. Kaya I was mentioning kanina na in our programs in the ICCA consortium is documenting territories of life, sustaining territories of life, which includes economic livelihoods. But livelihoods are economic systems that are appropriate to the territories of life. Kaya kami dun sa aming strategic action plan, which we recently crafted 2 weeks ago in Kenya, parang may panawagan yung mga katubo na changing the world global economic order, which is very radical, pero parang yun yung gusto rin kasi namin. Parang what we're saying is, all the things that we're experiencing, climate change impacts, ganyan, biodiversity loss, meron siya talagang drivers of destruction. And this is connected to the entire global economic order. So sana maganda rin na while, of course, we're now thinking of how to make our ancestral domains more sustainable, maganda rin na yung mundo, pakinggan niya how indigenous peoples run and manage their economic systems, their biodiversity areas. Because baka we can learn from indigenous peoples when it comes to, stopping the drivers of destruction that has caused climate change and has caused the loss of biodiversity all over the world.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Zeroing in on the Ifugao rice terraces, is it more for ecotourism or do you also see income for the rice farmers? So I'm zeroing in on the Ifugao rice terraces.
Yung rice terraces kasi is multifunctionality yan. Of course, culture. That's our sacred. That's our identity. Pangalawa, it's also your source of food. So hindi lang naman rice kasi. After, yung sa fallow period kasi, we normally plant vegetables, rice paddies, o di kaya yung iba nga may rice fish culture. So there's food there, there's livelihood. Of course, there's ecotourism. Pero yun nga, even si former Secretary of Tourism, Gemma Cruz Araneta, when she was into rice terraces preservation problem, sabi niya, tourism is one intervention, but it is not the solution to the problems of rice terraces. It's dahil multifunctional siya, very complex rin yung kanyang solutions. Kasi ang pinakamalaking problema ngayon ng rice terraces is the outmigration, the younger Hugos, which I think is also a problem in the entire Philippines. Marami nang lumilisan sa mga rural areas, marami na rin. And whenever you leave your ancestral domain, nag-suffer yung mga traditional livelihoods mo. Nag-change na rin yung core values ng mga younger generations. So, ganun talaga, may effect siya doon sa katutubong pamayanan. Pero sa akin lang naman, what's important is, even if the younger generations leave Ifugao, basta hindi pa rin nila nakakalimutan yung kanilang cultural identity. And at least one of the members of the family should stay behind and continue to manage, the rice terraces, the ancestral domain, the ancestral woodlands, or the ancestral forests. And they are supported by their siblings. Kasi ganun naman talaga ang Filipino story. Lumisan ka, nag-abroad, yung mga OFW, gusto papadala sa kanilang mga naiwan sa Pilipinas. Ganun rin naman sa mga katutubong pamayanan, lumisan yung mga iba, naging teacher sa city, naging businessman sa city, pero nagpapadala sila ng tulong doon sa mga naiwan sa linulong lupa who continue to maintain their ancestral documents.
Thank you.
That's the adjustment that we have to accept.
Thank you.
Thank you very much po, Sir Cesar and Sir Teddy. We have question po sa ating Q&A. Nagkaroon po ba ng chance na inadopt ng government ang paraan ng pangangalaga ng mga IPs sa mga ICCA in terms of land protection programs na ini-implement nila?
Yeah, we have had success globally, not just in the Philippines, but globally. Tulad ng nabanggit ko nga kanina, while of course there's still no law, may conflict pa rin yung IPRAT sa yung NAIPAS, but at least doon sa Bukidnon, ang kwento ng mga higaonan is more or less the DNR recognizes na may mga higaonans doon at saka meron silang effective traditional management systems doon sa bundok nila. So more or less there's respect and there's synergy in the efforts of both government at yung IPs to protect the area. Kasi otherwise, kung hahayaan mo yung batas magsalita, IPRA versus NAIPAS, kakaroon yan ng gulo. So at least doon may harmonization. And in other areas in Africa, definitely in Australia, in Canada, napakalakas talaga ng mga First Nations doon. Kasi sa Canada, ang tawag nila sa mga communities ay First Nations, mga naunang bansa. Ganun rin sa Australia, the indigenous peoples of Australia talaga, yung kanilang ancestral domains, ang nasusunod ay yung protect yung traditional biodiversity management systems. Ang challenge talaga kasi ngayon is how do you document it? Tulad nga sabi ni Sir Cesar, how do you document it and say that this is effective? Because yun nga batas kasi is written. So yun yung challenge because you're putting something that is oral and traditional into something that's very bureaucratic and dogmatic. So yun yung, I think, hamon na hinaharap namin ngayon. But definitely, there are a lot of success stories all over the world. And may mga, depende naman kasi kung ikaw ay mag-push back talaga, paglaban mo, eventually, makikinggan ka talaga ng PR.
Thank you very much po. I think wala na pong questions sa ating Q&A and from our panelists. Sir Teddy, before we end po, do you have any message this is speaking from a youth perspective, do you have any message for the youth, especially sa mga environmental advocates natin and our indigenous people's rights advocate na patuloy na tumitindig din at lumalaban para protektahan yung mga ancestral lands natin and also for an overall environmental conservation in the Philippines?
Okay. Well, una, I look forward to more interaction with the young people in this webinar. Importante yun. Your generational issue is about the environment. Yung aming generational issue was about nuclear war. So, medyo nawala na yun, natapos na yung Cold War. Diyan pa rin, pero medyo wala. Ngayon, ang biggest issue talaga is about climate change, about the environment. So, importante na makilahok talaga yung mga kabataan. Because sabi nga nila, if we're not able to stop yung itong trends in terms of climate change by 2050, then baka maging irreversible na yung damage na nangyayari sa ating mundo. And the Philippines is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. Having said that, importante sana kung ikaw ay magiging volunteer for the environment, kayong mga kabataan, importante na kilalarin rin natin yung katutubong karapatan. Because hindi mo pwedeng ihiwala yung IP rights at saka yung environment. They're very much connected. Most issues among indigenous peoples are environmental in nature. Kaliwada. Yan nangyayari sa Brooks Point sa Palawan ng mining. Yan nangyayari sa amin sa Cordillera. Whether it's big dams or mining. It's connected to our ancestral domains. It's very environmental in nature. And then tulad ng sabi ko kanina, the remaining critical habitats and key biodiversity areas in the Philippines are mostly located in ancestral domains. Kaya nga hindi mo pwedeng iwalay. So sana, if you're an environmental advocate, also learn about indigenous people's cultures and be also an activist for indigenous people's rights. Yun lang. And thank you very much. Hope to see you guys and interact with you more in the future.
Thank you very much po, Sir Teddy, for an afternoon of great discussion, and maraming salamat po sa ating mga participants na sinamahan tayo after this hour. Again, we had an overtime, pero this has been another great discussion, and you also had a good exchange of information and discussion. And heads up po, nasa chat box na po natin ang ating link for the evaluation form for e-certificates. And also an announcement from FEP, we will not be having a webinar po next Friday, November 3. So that will be a rest day for everyone. Before we end, again, great appreciation for our guests and for our attendees. See you po on November 10. So thank you very much po and have a good day, everyone. Thank you po.
Thank you. Bye-bye.